This first news story comes to us from Gizmodo. Kyle Barr over there writes, 9 out of 10 classic video games are commercially unavailable, study finds. From fixing up old defunct Sega Saturns to dropping hundreds of dollars on eBay for rare titles like GameCube's Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem, retro game enthusiasts already know the struggle of enjoying early games. For video game historians, the situation is even worse. There are several
Not me, baby. Kept my stuff.
Yeah, but not everyone's as smart as you, Adrian.
I know.
Especially me.
I just wanted to gloat a little bit.
I am the dumbest of them all. There are several nationally recognized and lauded services for watching thousands of classic films, but a new study shows that for the vast majority of gaming history from the 1970s onward, 9 in 10 games remain unavailable for customers, and by extension, the growing sector of video game archivists. A report from the Video Game History Foundation working alongside the Software Presentation Network claims that the vast majority of games from the 1970s going all the way up until 2009 are largely kept out of players' and historians' hands. Only 13% of games released in the US before the age of vast digital distribution are legally and commercially available. The other 87% are only playable through some museums or through industry-derided piracy. Otherwise, you would need to spend inordinate amounts of time and money to collect old software and hardware to experience relics of gaming's past. In a phone interview with Gizmodo, Phil Salvador, the library director at the VGHF, compared the situation to film where there was much more buy-in from the movie industry at large for preservation. Imagine if you could only get Titanic on VHS, and even then you can only see it behind a glass case. In the group's survey, they looked at 4,000 historical video games released prior to 2010 and researched whether they remain available through legitimate rights holders. This included games from abandoned platforms like the Commodore 64 and more from still widely available consoles like the PS2. Even though that latter system, speaking of the PS2, was one of the most popular game consoles of all time with a long lifespan that lasted even past the PlayStation 3's release, only 12% of PS2 games are still available or remain available. There was no 5-year period before 2010 where availability rose above 20%. For games released before 1985, only 3% are now accessible. This article continues on, and I recommend you go give it a read over at Gizmodo because it's very interesting and eye-opening as to how it all works with like IP holders. And I mean, ultimately, it just comes down to like the people who own these IPs either just not re-releasing them or not releasing them in a way that's easily preserved,
or not preserving them themselves and it getting destroyed or lost.
Original codes just being lost completely and stuff like that. Yeah. So it's really a sad situation. I just want to like kind of talk about it and like how I don't know, hear Adrian's thoughts on it, because I mean he's kind of like, if anything, I look to you as like you are the gaming historian here. Even though we've both been pretty much playing games for the same amount of time, like you have taken a much like your knowledge base is much wider than mine. You just have a much better memory. You definitely pay attention a lot more than I did when I was a kid with gaming and stuff like that, and with that sort of like gaming history. And so, yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this.
This is shocking. I mean, I didn't think it was as bad as it is, as far as the amount of games that are basically lost to time or are at danger of being lost to time.
It's one of those things you hear all the time, but yeah, you never think it's that bad. Like even the statistic about PS2, like that blew my mind because that console had.
It wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't that long ago, and the library is vast. So you'd think there'd be a much higher chance of a lot of those games being preserved. So it's wild that like, what was it, 20%? I'm like, what? Like that's great. Like not even a quarter of the games are accessible. But sorry, you were going on.
Oh no. I appreciate that because so one of the most like prevalent things to me, or one of the biggest cases of why this is preservation efforts should be preserved, of course, is what. So in a way, the original, this is the easiest way for me to relate it. The original Kingdom Hearts does not exist anymore. The server or the hard drive that was holding that code, it got destroyed. I can't remember if it was like by the building got flooded or something like that, and it destroyed it. So Square Enix had to go back and like extract data out of disk somehow, like, and use tools to do that. But that original copy of the game, like that compiled code, doesn't exist anymore because they only had it in that one place. Because and it's not just them, it's like it's a lot of teams like that when they think, oh, it's gone gold, we burn it to the disk, we don't need to, you know, do anything with it as far as making sure that we have access to this version of the game. But I say that to say that take that and multiply it by thousands and then go back further when they didn't even have those kinds of tools to be able to save their games and to, you know, upload them or store them away somewhere that the disk won't get corrupted that they're on or whatever memory they were using. This what am I trying to say? This study is a wake up call into that we need to look into better ways to preserve our works going forward. I have been reading, I think it was a result of that study, that there are a lot of smaller developers who are taking their finished code or even sometimes their working code and they're compiling it and giving it to video game history foundations or museums or anything like that, just so that, you know, somebody out there has complete code of this game if anybody ever wants to look at it. But again, that's only the small guys. You know, Microsoft has been I don't know why they stopped doing it, but they were kind of in their own way working towards that with backwards compatibility and being able to sell their titles all the way back to the original Xbox on the store. But it's not enough. It's kind of disheartening that, you know, even if it was a bad game, it was still a work of art that somebody worked on, and it still should be preserved for future generations, even just to study as okay, this game didn't work. Why didn't it work? What did they do here? And what should you have done differently? You know, kind of deal. But at the end of the day, these are all works of art that people worked on. And just like, you know, static art that you see in a museum or you know, at an art show deserves to be preserved. These do as well. This is people's time. These are made, you know, people's works that they have passed, you know, and this is their legacy. And now you're telling me that some of these people's legacy will just be lost to time. There's nothing we can do about it. So I would say even today, you know, it's almost, you're not going to make a profit on it as a large company, but it's almost like a responsibility if you're going to partake in this medium, that you need to preserve these works going forward. It doesn't matter how good or how bad or how little they sold or how much, you know, anything like that. Just the fact that it was made for art's sake. These need to be somehow preserved or, you know, saved in some format and kept for future generations to go back. Just like we look at paintings from the 1400s, you never know if somebody 300 years from now might want to, you know, pull up, I don't know, Cyberpunk and look at it. It's going to be archaic, you know, but it's still a work of art. And that was really disheartening to find out. And it's also really disheartening that there are lawyers that are lobbying for these practices not to go through because I guess in a sense, like I was saying, there's no profit in it really. That's what they can't say, but are basically saying is like, there's no profit in it for us. It's too much work, which is crazy to me because you're a multi-billion-dollar company. Right. I don't know how you can't invest in something like this. You're a multi-billion-dollar company that's profiting off the arts. And as a human, and you know, as a being who is part of a species that is able to communicate via art and produce art, like I said, you should feel obligated to be able to preserve this because art is such a big part of our society, whether you realize it or not, whether you think art is dumb. Yeah. The car you drive, the house you live in, when you go out to eat, the dishes that you eat, they're all prepared a certain way so they look appetizing to you. It's all has roots in the arts, and it's not only just to society but really to humanity. Art is so important, and it's crazy that, you know, in an art form as involved as video games are, that we don't take the preservation of such seriously enough.
Right.
So.
Yeah. No, and even with, so I'd kind of mentioned to you even before the show, like in one hand, like you would, I mentioned like kind of the move away from physical and going to digital. And I mentioned that as being like a worry, like, oh man, like now, like they can't even get like a hold of a physical copy to extract or rip or whatever you want to call it, to like preserve. But then, you know, you had mentioned, you had a response to me. And so just now I was thinking, I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, you're right. Like you had mentioned, well, being digital, like it should be easier to get, you know,
it should be easier than ever.
There should be ways to like extract it or rip it or whatever you want to call it. But what just hit me now is what I was going to say is like, what is it? Other than trade secrets potentially being leaked, how hard is it for like PlayStation, Xbox, and these companies, whoever, like EA, to just like to send these files to, you know, make these libraries, these historical services, whatever they're called. I don't know. I can't remember the.
Why don't they
have them sign an NDA and then just send them source codes of these games and be like, hey, like if this ever leaks, like you're done for. But otherwise, like, yeah, hold on to this for us, like. Since we're not willing to, since we can't spend the extra 50 cents to store it on our cloud drive that we already have, you know?
Or you know what? Even maybe, I don't know if there's a national academy or association of computer sciences and arts, you know, like a government kind of thing. I know we don't normally want to, you know, involve the government, but like maybe create one where it's a neutral thing that all, you know, major publishers and developers contribute into, as like a shared entity. That way it's a third party, you know, that they don't have to worry about their trade secrets being capitalized on or stole from one another. But once you finish a title, you know, then you send a copy of that game to that neutral party, that neutral building.
It just goes in a safe.
Know, and a digital safe or a physical safe if you want to give a physical copy. Although you do have to worry about disk rot at that time, so I probably would say more lean towards like give a copy of the finished game so that it's playable, and then give a compiled copy of the code, the working code for the game. And then you know what? You can even make it into a museum. Why don't you just charge people to go in there? Then it will pay for itself. You can keep the data storage history stuff on, you know, away from the public. But then if people want to go in and play these games in the future, or, you know, you can take computer science class, game development classes there, and they can go in and look at stuff, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, in this article, they do mention there are two organizations that are essentially doing that at this point. Yeah. So the Video Game History Foundation, which is in Oakland, which I've been there. I bummed I never got to go there when I lived so close. Like it was like an hour away, and I used
to volunteer there actually.
And then there's also this other place which I actually didn't realize they did it because it's really close to where I grew up in New York. Strong Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. I was like 20-30 minutes from where I lived, and apparently they've started, like, you can go there and they just have a bunch of video games there. Like they're into the video game preservation. They work alongside with the Video Game History Foundation, like to preserve games and promote the preservation of them. I'm like, oh, cool. The next time I go see my parents, technically the museum, the Strong Museum of Play is geared more towards kids, but I'm like, I got a couple kids.
Hey, mom and dad, you want to take a family vacation trip up to the Museum of Play?
Yeah, I mean,
it'd be good for the boys.
It's only like 30 minutes from the house, so heck yeah, I'd go myself. I don't care. Next time I'm out there. So my parents listen to the podcast once in a while, so remember that when we come visit, we're going to Strong Museum of Play so we can play some video games. But yeah, so there are organizations out there. So it just comes down to like really the developers making it happen. And I guess that's the saddest thing is like, it's very obvious they don't care because movies are preserved extremely. That's what it mentions right at the beginning of the article. Like there's a whole like films,
the film library. Yeah.
There's like any film you could imagine, no matter how big or small. Like there's a sort of vast library of like a backlog of films from forever. And like you were mentioning, like art paintings literally are held in museums all across the world for hundreds of years worth of paintings, thousands, and then for some reason, like video games, like this also very big art form, which I guess I should say it's big within the last, like, it's very new compared to those formats. It is very new.
True.
So
it is art,
but it is still art. And so it's like, you'd think we would have learned from those other two instances, from physical art to moving pictures, and now like, all right, now we're going into gaming. Oh yeah, we should probably start preserving stuff. But it is interesting, like the totally different view on it. But hopefully something like this article coming out, like, can kind of shake some people and be like, hey, yeah, like you said, a wake up call, and be like, this is a big deal. Like, these are more important than we all might have realized. And then there were certain people might have realized. So
art, unfortunately, has always been seen as like a non-necessity, as far as society is concerned, because it's not, I don't know how to put it. It's not in your face like a lot of other things are, like business or science or anything like that. That would be, inherently, you can see the, how should I put it, contribution to society easier than you can, or the average person can see it easier than they can with art, right? Like I was saying before, people don't realize how much art impacts their lives, in their everyday choices. The clothes, coming down to the clothes you wear, to, the bottle that the soap that you use comes in. Somebody had to design that. Some artist had to design that.
Yeah.
So I was watching a video, and they were like, yeah, even like the blue collar guys, who, they get up and they work the construction jobs. The hammer that you have, the handle of it has carvings in there. They don't have to do that, but somebody did, So yeah, art is just, I said it before. I'm kind of just rambling now because
art and design is everywhere, and it's important.
It's so important. Like, if you were to take away the artistic nature of things that are in our society that we don't realize, everything would be so gray and lifeless, and I think you don't ever want to see that reality.
Yeah, and to kind of like even connect it to what's going on here, like even being able to see previous stuff and learn from that, like that's the biggest thing too, is like to forget your history. Like I know there's a famous quote, and I don't know
doomed to repeat it.
There you go. I was like, I know there's a famous quote, I don't know it, so I'm not even gonna pretend to. But there you go. Excuse me. So it's like, history is a great thing. Like, we learn a lot from history. Like, we should learn a lot from history. And so, yeah, like not being able to go back and again, like 100 years from now and be like, oh, how are things done? Like, I don't know. Trends cycle all the time. Like, I don't know. I hear it all the time, like with fashion stuff. I'm not in the fashion at all, but you hear from people like the older generation, like, oh, I remember this, like having these style pants or this style whatever.
It's happening right now. 90s and 2000 stuff is back.
Yeah, exactly. And a few years ago, it's like, oh, I remember these from like the 70s or whatever.
Right.
Like things like are cyclical, and so like to be able to learn from those previous things and even make it better than it was before, like that's what's important as well. So again, preserving video games is good, and I really hope again this kind of report that came out is a wake up call, like you said, to the industry, to these leaders in the gaming industry, and be like, hey, let's take this seriously.
Jeff Keighley,
what are you doing, Jeff Keighley?
Yeah,
Jeff Keighley, you're doing everything else. You got the Game Awards, you got Summer Game Fest. Why don't you like freaking start?
I haven't heard him say it. Maybe he has. I haven't looked, but I haven't seen anybody retweet anything. I don't think he's talking about this study.
Yeah.
Has anybody shown it to him?
He seems like the guy to do something about it. Like, he's doing everything else. Like, get Jeff Keighley in there.
Like, he is the person that can get access to talk to the people who can do something about this.
Honestly, who I would love to do something, and actually they actually are kind of doing something about it right now, is Danny O'Dwyer with NoClip.
That'd be a good one.
I just saw a tweet the other day that they had gotten like hundreds of hours worth of
Oh yeah, the
video,
old game,
like
the
old game coverage
infomercials and keynotes.
It was all just going to be like deleted, like thrown in a trash bin somewhere, and they collected it all and have been like digitizing it all. I'm like, that is so cool. You can watch it all if you support my Patreon. So like, really, No Clip's perfect as well. Like, get them, start the No Clip Video Game History Museum or something, or the foundation.
That's a perfect example, though. Like, look at how many decades of stuff that would have just been gone, destroyed.
Yeah. And they took it and are doing the work to digitize it. So
stuff that we've never seen.
Yeah. It's awesome. Daniel Dwyerson, man. Thank you so much for watching that clip from our podcast. Remember, if you want to watch the whole episode, the full episode, link will be in the description below. You can click on that and check it out. We got listener questions. We got more news segments. We got what you playing. We got a lot of fun things. So yeah, more than just the news. There's a lot more to the show that you should go check out. So remember, click that link in the description. Check out that full episode.